Today, we're going to practice using trig functions in solving right triangles. And these problems are going to fall in a category that I think of as a 2 out of 3 game. Out of the 3 things in an equation, I'm going to give you 2 of them and ask you to find the 3rd one. That's like the solving right triangle game, where it always starts. Given 2, find the 3rd. Even after we get pieces of a triangle, it's always going to be given 2, find the 3rd. We just need practice in different situations where I give you 2 things and you find the 3rd. In addition to that game, that base game, we're going to play the which trig function should I use game. I should probably come up with a better name for that game, but that's the one I got. And we want to remember sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine theta is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent theta is opposite over adjacent. So we look at what we're given and we decide which trig function we should use. That's why I picked that name for the game. It's fairly descriptive of what's going on. All right, let's take a look at this first problem. I have here's my triangle. We want to find the side that I labeled A, and we're given this angle 36, and we're given this 150 feet. So we want to identify what we're looking for, and then we want to identify what we're given. We're given that a side of 156. What side is that? The 150 feet is opposite the right angle, so the 150 feet is a hypotenuse. So right now we're thinking sine or cosine. We look at the given angle, 36 degrees, and then we look at the A, and we have to decide what is A relative to that 36-degree angle. What is A relative to that 36-degree angle? Here's 36. What would we call A? Opposites. Imagine standing in that 36-degree angle with a hand on each of the sides that make that angle, and think about what side you're looking at. That will be the opposite side. If we stand with at the right angle with our hands on the 2 legs, we will be looking at the hypotenuse. But looking straight ahead. Don't be like, well, if I look over here, then I'll be looking at the. What would you be looking at looking straight ahead? So we're given an opposite. We're looking for the opposite. We have of an angle that we know, and we have a hypotenuse. So which trig function should we use that involves opposites and hypotenuse? Sine. So let's set up the ratio involving sine. So the angle that we're going to use sine. The angle that we're given is 36 degrees. We don't know what the opposite is, so I'm just going to put A there. But we do know what the hypotenuse is, and that's 150. We have set up the trig ratio. Angle. Sine of the angle is opposites over hypotenuse. Any questions on the setup? The next thing we need to do is solve for the missing piece. In this case, I'm looking for A. If A divided by 150 is sine of 36, then that means A is 150 times the sine of 36. So we're going to rearrange this to say that A is 150 times the sine of 36. There are a few ways we can get here. We could think we're trying to solve for A, and A is being divided. The inverse of dividing is multiplying. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 150. That might be one way that we think of what to do. So we might think multiply both sides by 150. This is a 2 out of 3. That was a little early. I'm not done with the problem. Oh, that's right. They're not clapping for me. This is a 2 out of 3 problem with multiplication. So a divided by 150 is equal to sine of 36. That means a is 150 times the sine of 36. Sometimes it's messy to think about when we have sine of 36 and 150. We have these complicated factors. So let's just simplify it down and look at 3 things that are related. 2 is equal to 6 divided by 3. That's a nice, easy one to remember. And it means 2 other things. So we can help remember that these 3 are all containing the same information. 2 is equal to 6 divided by 3. This means that 6 is equal to 2 times 3. That's just the same information rearranged. We could also write this as 3 is equal to 6 divided by 2. This helps me keep things organized. The one that I'm looking at, I'm trying to figure out what A is. It looks like 2 is equal to 6 divided by 3, and I'm trying to figure out what the top number is. So I'm going to 6 is equal to 2 times 3. So that means the 6 is the product of the 2 and 3. So that tells me to multiply the 150 times the sine of 36. Then we're going to grab our calculating machines. And type what we see. Oh, we're going to make sure that we're in degree mode. And we just type like we see it. Type it like we see it. 150 sine 36 is 88.1, 88.2, but it said round A to the nearest foot. So we'll just call it 88 foots. So in this scenario, 88.1 ... whatever comes next. The 1 says to go back to the 88 because we have not passed halfway. Any questions? So the stages that we went through, we identified the pieces that we were given. Opposites, an angle, the opposites, and the hypotenuse. We identified which trig function fits that description. Sine of theta is opposite over hypotenuse. We plugged in what we knew and then solved for what we wanted to find. How's everybody okay? It's hard to tell. You all look at me like this. Students tend to be very stoic in math class. It's okay. I get used to it. We have a different set of information in problem number 2. I'm looking for this angle. So we should make a note of that. When we're looking for an angle, that means we know we're going to be using trig function, inverse trig functions. So it's good to have these thoughts at the beginning of the problem. Keep things organized. Make a note. When we're looking for an angle, that means we know we're going to be using inverse trig functions. Let's take a look at the angle that we're given and see the angle that we're looking for and see what information we're given relative to that angle. First of all, we have this 42. What is that? What should we call that 42? So the 42 is going to be our hypotenuse. It is opposite the right angle. So 42 is our hypotenuse. Looking at the angle we're looking for, and what theta is, the other side that we're given is 35. And what is 35 relative to the angle theta that we're looking for? It's adjacent. So this vertical one is opposite. So this one is adjacent. So in this case, we're looking for a trig function that involves adjacent and hypotenuse. Which trig function is that? Let's see, adjacent and hypotenuse means we're going to set up a cosine. We know we're looking for an angle, so we're going to use a cosine inverse. Cosine of theta that we don't know is the adjacent side, 35, over the hypotenuse, 42. Any question? Same thinking process that we used before to set up this equation. And it's still a 2 out of 3. We have the adjacent and the hypotenuse. We're going to use that to find the angle. Since we're looking for an angle, we know that's when we use inverse trig functions. So theta is a cosine inverse of 35 over 42. And I'm going to write it sideways because I'm going to write it like I'm going to type it. So we're in degree mode because we were in the previous problem, but I need cosine inverse of 35 over 42. So we end up with 33.5 and then stuff. Five says take the 3. The 5 says move the 3 up to a 4 because you have passed halfway. So we'll go to the next full degree. See that one as well, Tom. So, oh, I forgot. Sometimes we want to be doing this on our calculators. So hopefully I won't get any texts. So remember, trig functions on our phone calculators operate differently. Pressing the button does the trig function of whatever's on the screen at the time. So here I want the cosine inverse of 35 over 42. So if I press 35 divided by 42, I'm not ready to press cosine inverse yet because it'll try to do the cosine inverse of 42, give us an error. But if I press equals, then the calculator is telling me what 35 over 42 is, and I want the cosine inverse of this number. So now I can press cosine inverse or second cosine. And I don't have to hit the equal sign. So just remember that your phone calculator, the trig functions take the sine, cosine, tangent, or inverse sine, inverse cosine, or inverse tangent of whatever happens to be on the screen at the time. So if we try it early, 35 divided by 42 cosine inverse, the calculator is like, all error. It doesn't tell me what's going on. But now I'm going to, of course, get texts because I put my phone up on the screen. I'm going to let the guys know that they just got recorded and they'll be on the YouTubes. I was about my supposed D&D game, but I missed what they said, so. Any questions? It's a 2 out of 3 game. In this case, I wanted the 3. It was behind a cosine, but I had the fraction over here, so I just had to do the inverse cosine. So didn't have to do any fancy rearranging. I just had to move the cosine to a cosine inverse. How's everybody okay? Three. Here we have this given 21.6 degree angle. Things got fancy. 21.6 degrees. And then I've got that vertical is the vertical side. I'm not even showing you what I'm looking at. Number 3. And I got that 121. What is that 121 relative to the angle? That one is opposite. So one of our given things is the opposite. And what is the B, the side that we're looking for? What is that relative to the angle? Adjacent. So I need a trig function that involves opposite and adjacent. And what trig function is that? Tangent. That way we have a full set, sine, cosine, and the next one is tangent. This is because predictable. So the tangent of 21.6 is the opposite, which is 121, which we know, over adjacent, which is just has the name B. So this one is a little bit different. Now, the thing that we're looking for is the denominator. This also happens when we're using trig functions to find the hypotenuse. The thing that we're looking for is in the denominator. So we got to figure out how to get at B. If we want to do the thing to both sides, we can multiply both sides by B, then divide both sides by the tangent of 21.6. That's one way to think about how to get at B. We could say B is 121 over tangent of 21.6. And we could think 2 things. We multiply by B, divide by the tangent of 21.6. Remember, tangent of 21.6, it's all one big thing. I don't move them separately. Tangent by itself doesn't mean anything. The 21.6 is not even there. It's inside of a tangent. So we did actually 2 things. We multiply both sides. By B, and then we divide both sides by the tangent of 21.6. Another way that we can think about this is to think about our 6 is equal to 2 times 3. What we're looking at is 2 is equal to 6 divided by 3, but we're looking for the 3. And so we want 3 equals 6 divided by 2. So it tells us how to rearrange things. So if we're looking for the denominator, it's like we swap the denominator and the tangent 21.6, just because that's how division and multiplication interact. So you can think in terms of do the same thing to both sides of the equation. You could think in terms of rearranging the 6, the 2, and the 3. The best thing to do is whatever it occurs to you to do at the time. That's always best. If you're like, oh, no. I don't like this rearranging business. I don't know what you're on about with that. I'm going to multiply both sides by b, then divide by the tangent of 21.6. Valid. So now we can just take what we have and type it in our calculating machine. Type it like we see it. We're just going to go 121 divided by the tangent of 21.6, close parentheses, and then hit enter. So it looks like that side is 305.6 and then stuff. The 6 is past halfway, so we'll go to 306 because we want to round to the nearest yard. So it's the 6 that tells us to push the 5 up to a 6. On our phone calculator, as long as we remember how the trig buttons work on our calculator, then this is okay. We have to just type it in this kind of weird order. Hopefully you guys have sorted out their texting business. So to do this on our phone calculator, I want to do 121 divided by the tangent of 21.6. So I can start off by saying 121 divided by, but I can't hit tangent yet, even though that's how we say it. I can't hit tangent yet because I'd be trying to take the tangent of 121. I want the tangent of 21.6, so that's what I got to put in next. Also notice that the second is still on, so it says tangent inverse. I don't want that, so I have to turn the second off. This number is the tangent of 21.6. I have not resolved the dividing part. So then we have to hit equals. That's a little bit weird. Generally, we don't like this, but we don't want to write a bunch of stuff down in the middle. Could mess us up with the rounding errors. So on our phone calculating machines, we would type 121, then divided by, then we would put the 21.6, then we would hit the tangent button. And then we can hit the equals button. Any questions? So it's a little bit trickier on the phone syntax, but we're more likely to have phones for our calculating machines than we are to have Texas Instruments calculators. How's everybody okay? All right. So what I wanted to emphasize here is just the way we think our way through a problem. We take a look at what we have. We see how that fits with the tools we have at our disposal. We look at what we have and what we need. Remember, you're always going to be setting up a 2 out of 3. You're going to be taking 2 pieces of information, combining them with a third piece that you don't know in some fashion, and then using your mad algebra skills to solve for the missing piece. And it's always the same thing. Even if we wanted more parts of the triangle, we would just pick 2 things. And then the new one that we're looking for is our third. We make a 2 out of 3 problem. We solve for the missing piece. How's everybody okay? All right. Let's take 5. Come back and talk about significant figures and a little bit more about rounding, and then probably finish early. Hope no one's disappointed. Let's take 5.